Headcount experts, special episode. I think we're at 24. I don't know if these count. You know, when I ask Claude to summarize these, I don't know if the bonus episodes are counting when I'm making my table of contents for our future book. But nonetheless, episode 24, special reaction episode. Before we get into it, Chris, what are you working on? What's on your plate this month, this week? What's going on with Meander? What's going on with LearnDot? Tell me about what's going on with you. I'll give you a quick summary, then we can get right into the content.
Yeah, big summer really. Huge project going on right now where I'm launching this new AI and HR accelerator. So it's a 8-module series, a take and self-study, comes with a bunch of SHRM PDC credits so that you can kind of requalify. And the idea is to kind of onboard, you get access to all the platform, all of the former courses that we did. And then this is a new kind of progressive course that takes you about 20 hours to get through and will take you from zero to hero in AI and really give you a lot of credibility in doing it. And I'm actually pairing that with a new thing that I'm testing where we're actually creating simulated cases. So there's one thing to sit through a course and answer quiz-based questions, but a lot of this you actually have to put in practice, and it can be quite hard to practice on real HR data. So we've developed these cases, the same things that we used to do at business school. If you've seen anything from Harvard Business School, they do these cases all the time. But you actually work through a case, takes you 30, 45 minutes, and you get live feedback based on an answer key, which you'll never see. Claude, which actually looks at the answer key, looks at your answers, and will give you kind of feedback on where to go, and then direct you to the courses and the videos and the free content that you need to upskill. So a lot of work going on in really making the Academy best in class, but really excited about that. The only thing that's getting in my way is spending a little bit of time on the beach. Why we've got a little bit of good weather here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, you have to make the most of an East Coast summer. But that's why that's the difference between I'm from New York, New Jersey, and I'm now in Los Angeles. Every day's an 8 in Los Angeles, but there's never that moment where everyone's like, hey, we all have to come out because it's been 38 degrees for the last 6 weeks. Anyway, jealous of the beach time. My side, I'm doing implementation stuff. I've been really diving into like how to get our customers onto the platform. I am building an approvals AI, right? So like our approvals product, like if someone makes a headcount request, it's so advanced that it slows down the implementation when people learn about what's possible. It's normally like, oh, my manager, then finance, then TA, then good, which was our first approvals product, funny enough. But as it grew in popularity, we developed it to like, if the salary is within this range and it's this department, route it to this person only if it came from this user. So we want people to be able to like make just natural language. This is what I want. And then it create the prompts for our implementation team and or like identify like, oh, you can't do that, or there's circular logic or it's conflicting. I think that'll really reduce the implementation time. But that's like my vibe. I'm not allowed to vibe code because we have so many different microservices that have like relationships that I can't add code to the code base without all this additional knowledge and training. So like stick to marketing and sales, fine. But this little app I can do because it's kind of independent, doesn't really affect our code base. So I'm excited for that, but really just trying to like nail that process down for the Q3, Q4 busy season. And one of the main articles I'm writing, which maybe we'll talk about it on a future episode, but it's about headcount IDs. Right. So like one of the Headcount 365 sale points, or at least I'm going to market with it, is that we create this universal ID, right? One ID for what a headcount is across all 3 systems. And again, through the implementation work that I'm doing, it's like people call it budget ID, finance ID, seat ID, position ID, requisition ID, job ID, opening ID. Each individual system has its own ID system, as well as like a use case for someone to like game that system for the benefit of their job. Like recruiters adding the same job twice in the ATS under different titles to see like which one gets a better inbound response rate. Maybe that's pre-candidate fraud, who knows? And so we run into all these examples. So we have to tell that central business systems person, hey, how do you organize all this stuff? How do you select an ID? And what's the difference between a display ID and a UUID that a system reads? And which ones are reused? Which ones are unique? So I want to release that article soon. Just waiting on my wonderful and lovely designer who did your image, by the way, your 4-box. We just posted it to make kind of like the visual representation of like all the IDs and one. So that's what I'm working on.
That's very cool.
Probably some topics.
I don't know if we've spoken about this, but I spent a lot of time designing approval workflows because it seems to be one of the things that catches headcount plans. And if you add too much friction, the company doesn't really grow. Everyone gets frustrated. People actually start to back channel approval requests, and then you lose control over it. Make it too easy, and then you actually lose the headcount run rate, and then you wind up having a RIF 6 months down the road. And so there's like, how do you get to that sweet spot? And we could actually do a whole episode on that. Maybe we should at some point. I'm actually going to do a module on that in the accelerator program. But as a systems engineer, that is my bread and butter. I really enjoy when something works and you connect all the boxes and you can actually see things flowing through, and it makes life better for everyone. So I'm really excited to see the launch of that. I hope I get a preview before everyone else.
Yeah, no, I'll show you approvals. Approvals is the most interesting because it's where it's like the first, we call what Headcount 365 orchestration, where it's like multiple people, but like the plan is what everyone has approved. But purgatory is like the pending approvals. And there's a couple of purgatories. There's backfills or attrition that is or should be a backfill, but isn't or might be. How many vacant seats do I have? There's that problem that we solve. There's also, I backfill this senior person with 2 junior people. What is the ID? There's someone that we hired this year is already getting backfilled. So the ID or the person already occupies space in an existing system, and then you're doing it again. There's accepted an offer that was a backfill, but they never actually started. So there's all these like little purgatories. And so figuring out how to capture all of them and organize them was the first challenge. And as we develop the product, it's more about who needs to know the information and where do we show it? Like, is it part of the budget yet? Or is it not part of the budget? There's a lot of, it's the most interesting problem. I've actually been talking with another one of our competitors, Caro, the founder there, and we just kind of like bounce ideas back and forth. And the thing that we always land on is like, this is the most frustrating but fun part of solving headcount is just the sheer complexity of not only what the process is, but how each individual customer has strung together systems and or workaround tools, put in base processes to fix it. And then how do you create a tool that can ingest all of that, give them the specificity that their very custom tool wants or not, and then like kind of navigate the whole thing. It's been, it's my favorite part of the job, but also the most frustrating. So there's probably some, psychologist who's going to tell me like that is a concept. The hardest is the most rewarding, but that's what we feel, and it permeates the headcount industry. So if you're an expert, shout out to you, Kathy. Anyway, that's life as a headcount founder. A lot of good posts this week. I want to dive into these. We only have a few minutes to kind of bust through some of the most interesting content. For those of you who haven't seen this segment before, I try to find the inflammatory, interesting, kind of statement-making content about headcount planning, workforce analytics, and try to get Chris to react to it. Then we kind of discuss a little bit. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 today from some interesting profiles around the space, in the space, and around the space. Starting first with Antonio. Let's see who I got here. Starting first with Antonio Labruzzo, based in Switzerland. He is the Senior Vice President of People at Arcara Life Sciences. And he has a post showing the ranking of HR priorities, even though the topic list stays stable. It's about, and let me pull it up while I do it. This is probably a great visual thing to do here. Is that the one? Here we go. How do I do it? All right, there's some people named there. All right, so here we go. From Antonio Labruzzo. HR priorities don't change as much as we think, but the weight of each topic does. What's going up? What's going down? And strategic workforce planning is top of the list. I don't know if these are in order, Antonio. If they are, you're speaking to the right crowd. But this is data from Boston Consulting Group and the World Federation of People Management Association. Have you heard of the WFPMA? Let's start there. Have you heard of that organization? That's probably deserving.
I haven't come across them yet, actually.
Okay, well, you earned 2 new follows, UFPMA.
All right.
Anyway, strategic workforce planning is on the up and up. Chris, what's your reaction?
I think it makes a lot of sense. This is what we're seeing in the market, right? It's everyone's looking at their organization and thinking, do we have the right people in the right seats? I think what's interesting is what's moving down, employee engagement, rewards, and recognition. I think that's implying that retention is no longer a concern. It's more about finding the right people and onboarding them. Maybe this is a kind of result of the riff culture of the last few years of now probably still have more people than they need, or the skill set's not right, or they don't know what skill set they want. And so the focus is now on how do you hire more people with the skills that you need? I think it makes sense. I don't really have any strong opinions against that. I would argue that if you overlook employee engagement for too long, then you're going to need to do a lot more recruiting and onboarding, and strategic workforce planning becomes less predictable because attrition is going to go up. If attrition goes up, it's probably going to be the best people who are going to get poached by others who are also prioritizing recruiting and onboarding. So does this then become a fight for the best talent? And how does that actually manifest in the market?
I have had my new global philosophy on recruiting applied to every position I hire for, or that I think people should hire for, is we are hiring for critical thinking, right? Like if an AI can do it, great. I'm buying the brain of the person who interprets that output and customizes it based on a message we're trying to send or a product we're trying to build. And in my space, at least, a lot of what we're doing hasn't been figured out yet. And so it requires this critical thinking. And so, looking for how does that fit in the org chart and how do I associate what I have today with what I'm trying to hire has been my, in a smaller company, it's been one of the biggest things that I look for. And in our app, we're seeing utilization of the org chart go up. I mean, we've developed some new features where you can organize it by different like work statuses and incorporate the hiring plan. But we see a lot of people going in there and trying to visualize what does my workforce look like. And I anticipate that will go up significantly between now and the end of the year as everyone's figuring out 2027. And so we've done some work to try to improve the visual scenario planning process for that purpose, but we're still in the learning process from our customers about what specifically are you looking for? Why is it important to you? And how do you want to be visualizing it with the data that you have here today? Like, what is the proper outcome and how do we optimize for that? So I'm not surprised about it. Obviously, kind of a layup for us in this specific space, but I know that here's my other theory. As AI makes productivity expectations go up, we are forcing the quality of work down, and people are accepting AI outputs as the thing that is like, okay, if I need to be this productive, it's good enough, and I'll just improve at the level of AI's improvements, which not only drives token usage up, which will then impact the tokens versus people conversation, but it is kind of changing the difference between who is good and who's the difference between I did a good job, my work got done, and I am good, and the work that I was done had a great outcome that I can stand by. And so that to me is the balance, but that's what I think is happening in the workforce planning conversation. Is that inflammatory, or what do you think about that?
No, it matches actually. So I'm actually in the middle of a 4-part framework that I'm presenting on my YouTube channel, and I'm recording part 2 today. And it's how do you think about AI-based org redesign? And the way that a lot of people are thinking about it is, okay, I've got 100 people in my org. AI can do 20% of the work. So the future org needs to be 80 people. Which of the 20 people I'm going to let go and replace by AI? And that is, we all know that's totally the wrong way to do it. And those companies then find they have to rehire those roles. They don't get the efficiency savings that they were expecting. And then AI transitions everything to the mean in terms of quality so that you don't actually get quality output. I think the key part is the critical thinking piece of how do you make sure that the right people in the right roles who can interpret the AI output so that you get the productivity gains, but you also don't drop quality down. And so the framework is actually really interesting. I picked this up at the Leading Edge Consortium last year with SciOp. And I'm actually presenting it back this year with operational headcount planning as a overlay of actually how to do this continuously. But that's a quick plug. But the framework is essentially like you look at the tasks that everyone currently does, you figure out how much of those tasks can be automated and to what extent they can be automated. Then you figure out what additional tasks do you now have. And this is the part that a lot of people miss. Because then once you've automated those, you actually need to assess the output of the automation that's hidden. Then you need to rebuild the roles. Then you need to figure out who's going to go in those positions, who's best fitted. And that's a pretty big chunk of work. Going from 20% of people are going to be let go because of AI to actually no, it's probably a 3-month project to get the right people in the right role. It's kind of a big deal. And I think that's why Antonio has strategic workforce planning as number one. Because if you don't get that right, everything else falls apart.
So that's the Recruiting Analytics YouTube channel for people who aren't following along, and kind of give a more detailed plug. Where can they find you at the PsyOp presentation? Where is that? When is that? If people want to sign up, maybe I'll flash something on the screen about how to join Chris for this presentation, but give us an idea where that's at.
Well, so the PsyOp Leading Edge Consortium, it's a subsection of the annual PsyOp conference, and this is focused solely on what's new in people analytics. So Society of Industrial Organizational Psychologists, if anyone doesn't know, September 30th, October 1st is 2 days that I'll be there. Poster session on operational headcount planning and AI role redesign as it relates to what's happening in the market right now. And that's actually off the back of, I have a number of different presentations I'm giving this summer to VC and PE portfolios around how this new framework is going to impact the way they think about headcount planning. It's such a new theory and a new framework. I think everyone's trying to figure out how to apply it. And I think that's what we're seeing in the market with some of the content that's coming out. I'm actually curious to see if anything else relates to that as we discuss this. But this wasn't actually a pre-planned plug. I've never seen these. The idea of the reactions is I haven't seen them before.
That is true. But while we're doing it, if you're new here, you haven't followed Chris, he runs Meander HQ. It's a learning academy. So you can take free courses, you can learn courses in a membership form, and you could take his knowledge, you could apply it at your business. He is a speaker, a public speaker, so you can catch him at events. He runs the Recruiting Analytics YouTube channel. Give him a follow. And great plug while I was able to pull up the next one from Sarika Lamont. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is the Chief People and Enablement Officer at Technomile. And let me pull up a little share screen here. Sarika Lamont says HR is leading the AI transformation at her company. As you could probably tell from her job title, Chief People and Enablement and AI Enablement Officer. She advises some of the AI startups that are in our network. And what she's saying is she doesn't view it to be so much of a technology problem as it is a human problem. And so she has taken on the role of AI transformation at the business as the HR leader. Chris, what's your take?
Yeah, it's totally right. The way I think about it, it's like with sales enablement, right? I think this is talent. Like AI is talent enablement is the way I think about it. With sales enablement, you buy sales software. You're going to buy Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. Your IT team is going to implement it, but who's actually going to get the sales team to use it and measure success? It's going to be your sales enablement team. I think the application of AI to a whole organization has to go through a team that understands how people work and how to improve the change management so that this actually gets adopted and utilized and measured in a way that's successful. I think HR is the team to drive this. And I think that the big gap that I'm seeing and the reason a lot of people are reaching out right now is they're trying to understand how does AI actually work to the extent that I can understand it so that I understand what to expect from the implementation. And then what does that change management process look like such that we can have a successful launch and we don't get these data points from the recent MIT study, which says, was it 95% of AI projects don't actually return a positive ROI. I think that's because if you just switch on a tool and tell everyone to use it, no one's going to actually get the benefits or it's not going to be measured successfully. I think totally the right thing to do is definitely what I'm seeing in the market right now.
Yeah, I think Chris and I are really just finding our vibe. I just released an article on the GTM engineer and why is it different from sales ops? So give it a read if you haven't checked it out quite yet, and give me some feedback on it. I'm learning from our customers. I'm learning from the AI world. But on the 13th, I believe we'll be hosting someone who is a people leader doing AI transformation now, culminating this series of what AI is doing to the org chart across Chris and I, and we'll be having a live discussion on it. So that'll probably go out towards the end of August, but it'll be a good kind of like live discussion about how a people leader is rolling out AI. And, it's interesting. I've seen a couple of different articles on how to roll out AI enablement and what's done well. I've seen like the Uber maxed out their tokens in the first 6 months. I've seen it should be led by the ops leader, the HR leader, the CEO. I think it just needs, to the point of the earlier conversation that we were having, is like someone needs to architect. Someone has to have the critical thinking of what is this doing to our organization and how are we investing it based on a skills map and what we're trying to achieve, et cetera. And there's always like in every large or successful tech company that I've been in, there's been like the lab, the experimentation, the think tank, and there should be that. But, to just roll it out broadly reminds me of the JC Penney. Instead of doing 99 cents, they rounded up to the whole dollar, and it like killed their sales. And instead of testing it in one store, they rolled it out to all their stores. I think this is like a case. This is like maybe it's a flashback from my childhood. I don't know. I will find it and flash it up on the screen to prove that I'm not talking crazy. But nonetheless, the AI needs to be handled strategically. And we've been having this open conversation. Is AI in the org chart? Is it not? Is it a people thing? Is it a technology thing? Where does it fall on the budget? So a good perspective to hear from someone who has a very credible background across multiple companies that I am a customer of and or have worked with. So shout out to Sarika, Lamont for the interesting posts. Let's see what else. I'm going to skip. That's another layup one. Let me get a big one for Chris here. Golly, I hope this is the right one. I think it is. There we go. All right. So Paul Walsh, a very different profile than what we typically see on the Headcount Experts reaction episode. Paul is a advisor who is in the security space, let's call it. And he wrote an article about Meta's being sued by former employees who said AI was used to dismiss people with disabilities or taking medical leave. And there's 26 different former employees that believe this. And it's all based on like token usage. And so it's naming Eightfold AI and it's saying it improperly discriminated against certain employees so that they were making management decisions without considering things like medical leave. Chris, what's your reaction?
So for years, I've been trying to figure out what Eightfold AI does. I've attended a bunch of conferences where they presented and not actually told us what they do. So this is actually, it's quite fascinating to read that actually they're creating hidden profiles of every employee. Now there is an issue with AI where it's, you set the criteria in which you're training it on, and it's going to make the selections based on that criteria. And AI is not inherently biased in itself. It's biased based on the information that you give it and the way you have it run its algorithm. And so if you're running algorithms and you're using token usage, you're going to discriminate against people who have not been trained in token usage, who are absent, who are on medical leave. And if you're not actually having a human then check the output, which seems to be where they may have gone wrong, then you're going to make these terrible mistakes. So I think this is one of the dangers of relying on AI to do things for you and not having a human in the loop to actually check the output. I think we're going to see a lot more cases like this, potentially more with the company that was named in that case. I have seen some of the new products that the founder is now building where they're going to create a digital twin of employees in the organization. And there's a whole question on that around who actually owns that digital twin. If I work for a company and they train an AI based on the work that I do, and then I leave, that AI twin then stays with the company and then they have my IP. And do you have to then sign away your IP? It's a very interesting, I think, legal and ethical framework that we're going to have to go through. And I think this is just the start of what we're going to see unfold. But I totally side with the people who are bringing that lawsuit. I think we need some transparency around what's happening here, because it's so important that if we are going to use AI successfully, that we actually do it in a way that is ethical and doesn't discriminate against people for things that they can't control.
The digital twin thing is super interesting. Like I immediately just thought like how I would try to handle that, but do I even have the power to do so as like an employee looking for a job? Is like creating an entity and licensing it for a period of time. So charging a licensing fee for my digital twin. Then could I deploy my digital twin at multiple companies? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's just maybe that's what I'm doing with Headcount 365 to a certain extent. Hard to say. There's probably a whole episode in what AI will do to the employment contract if things like this start to become prominent. But to the topic at hand, to Mr. Walsh and his almost 1,800 likes on this post. Follow Paul Walsh on socials. He's got some great content. It's a different perspective that I'm used to in the workforce management space, but it's a good one. So super interesting to see someone else's perspective on what this looks like. I think when you're in the bubble, right? Like you see the fraud detection AI, the candidate matching AI, the sourcing AI, they are all innovation in their own right, but they will have these downstream side effects that will have, in a properly operating government oversight world, some sort of reckoning with the impacts that they create on a more macroeconomic scale. So it'll be super interesting to follow these. I think the last thing that we saw that was big was like Mosley versus Workday, and a similar AI discrimination case. So, as these unfold, it'll be interesting to cover kind of like what the outputs are. But Paul Walsh, thank you for some great content. On to the next one. We have Anna Maria Sencovici. I hope I'm getting these correct. She's the Chief Talent Officer at the Royal Caribbean Group, has had a storied career in operations and learning and, all things HR across companies like American Express and, most recently Royal Caribbean Group. But she has a article. Let's do it here. Just let it nice. Or I think it's this one. Let's do it. Nope. Wrong one. This will let it nice later, I promise. There it is. That's the one. But from Anna Maria Sencovici, she has a article about what ChatGPT 5.6 can do, and the number that moves your headcount is $1. Now let me actually take a second on this one. I had my summary up and then I lost it. Price per okay. So back it up. From Anna Maria Sencovici, she's talking about the price to move the needle. And it's about token cost. And it's about how do you budget the amount of tokens for the output that it clears. And so she's talking to workforce planners and she's saying, if you're budgeting against a timeline, it got shorter. So the rate of innovation, so what you can automate with headcount, the cost of doing a task with headcount, the cost of replacing a headcount with an AI is becoming cheaper and cheaper in two ways: the capability of the existing model, but also the necessity to use the most powerful frontier model for some tasks is not necessarily required. So you can look at applying some of these smaller models to some more menial tasks. So it's about the cost. She's saying software development is the canary, but this is going to come for a lot of different jobs. Routine knowledge work. Chris, what is your reaction? I don't know if I did a great job of summarizing that, to be honest, but
no, it took me a minute to try and understand what was being said there, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and I decided to put it into a framework of how I've been building my business. And for references, there's like my core business, the Meander Talent Academy, and then I actually bought another business to learn how e-learning at scale works. And every time I've come across a problem where I'm spending a lot of time doing something, I start to think, well, should I hire someone and outsource this, even as a fractional FTE, or should I automate? And I do the trade-off and I'll look, okay, what is it going to cost me to screen someone and hire, and then all the employment contracts and everything else, and what is that versus just building a content workflow, for instance, for my kind of post content editing. And at the scale that I'm doing, it's it always makes sense to use AI, and AI is getting cheaper and cheaper. I use the Gemini kit for image generation. I use Anthropic for a lot of the text generation. And I still have myself in the loop, but it's expanding my own personal capacity in a way that hiring would cost 10 to 100x more. And so the token cost is going to be critical, but it's not just cost, it's cost and quality together. Because if you can use a cheap model and actually get a poor quality, and that's not really replacing the human. I think we were talking about this before we went live. Like, what is the quality issue with actually using these AI models? And if you can get 80% of the way there, and then the other 20% is your own capacity of actually improving the output, which is how I currently manage things, then that's probably feasible. I actually did a video of this when OpenAI released one of their new models. I kind of tested everything and said, okay, if we take the big three players and look at the three different tiers of models that each one offer, how effectively are they scoring resumes? And can we actually think about how we would replace that part of a recruiter's workflow with an AI tool that essentially does it? And that actually leads to some of the AI bias challenges. But if you're doing it yourself and you understand where the bias is potentially being layered in, then hopefully you can actually understand it a little bit more and defend it if it quite comes. But I think the models that are being released now, the high-end models, are actually so effective that the need to actually increase your team size is going away. And so I think what we're seeing is like fewer people enabled by AI, and the reduced token cost is going to drive that more and more, especially on the higher end models.
Yeah, I think, I have few opinions all at once, right? First, Jensen Huang says radiology is the first thing AI will replace really well. So for this particular conversation, if you're looking at things that are repetitive and predictable that require an interpretation that can be really trained well in a model, you're going to see that happen. And whether or not you could have afforded it when AI first came out, or you can afford it now, is a dependency on like the size of your firm and the availability of your staff, et cetera. But it will go that way. And so I agree. As far as building a team, right? My next opinion is building a team. As a founder, I am bad at everything equally, and AI makes me better to a degree. And I'll use the example last podcast we did was this like build versus buy on Claude. And as we went through it, you're like, oh, here's an image idea. And you gave me this 4-box. I just recently posted it. It's like, do it yourself, spreadsheets, AI, Headcount 365. And the image was really good. It was great as a concept, like immediately resonated. However, I have a designer who maybe I'll show the difference between like one and the next, that just gave it the last 10%. And for, my position or what I'm trying to do, like that last 10% may be the difference, right? It's the difference between doing a good job. I got it done. I put this image up. People get the concept. And like being good is like people remember the image. It actually drives clicks and conversions, yada, yada, yada. And then 3, my last and final is like when you're trying to constrict work and go back to the less people. If you're going to get rid of people to do work that can be done by AI, and increase the amount of work on the people that are left, you are going to be fed with the results of AI more often, and you'll have to figure out a way to keep the quality up. It just is what it is. And as model quality comes up, you'll have to determine what is the cost of the last 10 to my business or to my output versus the cost of getting it with a person versus a token. And I think like I like building. I've always been a builder, whether it's like physical things or now software, but like the last 10% is where all the good stuff happens. So that's the expensive part. I don't know, but we'll see. I don't disagree. Sorry, radiologists, but I have thoughts on the other stuff. I think as founders, it's great. I think it's never been a cooler time to be a founder, but as a bigger company, I don't know if I'd be advising you to make these big AI cuts. That's why everyone's calling BS, or you hear the rehire stuff. So that's my thoughts there. We'll finish with a layup. This is a layup. It's a closer. For those of you who even made it this far, thank you. While I pull that up, what did I spark something in you there?
Yeah, I was trying to think about it. It's like AI it's an enabler. It's not a replacement.
Right.
You shouldn't replace a good designer with AI, but you can increase the designer's capacity if they use AI for the low value work. I think it's the same with recruiting. A good recruiter can use AI to increase their own personal capacity. If you replace your recruiter with AI completely, then you're going to get poor quality hires. I think that's like the way I think about it. And I can't wait till I can actually hire a team. But the economics of hiring a team when you're only thinking fractional are much harder to justify.
Agree. I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't have experienced it more. All right, the last content here is from Jackie Simon, PCC. I don't know what PCC is. I have to learn about that. It's from Jackie Simon. She is a coach since 2009, an executive coach, and she's been an SVP of talent. She's been an advisor for multiple companies. This is a two-parter. It comes both with the post that I loved. If you're an exec, you better learn how to do headcount, and an article, which I will actually have to stop sharing and pull up. So it's a post and an article. It's all about understanding. I think this kind of ties the things that we were talking about throughout the episode. Strategic workforce planning is moving up in the queue of most important things. And she's saying there's basic questions that every company has to understand its workforce, that the difference between an executive and someone who just has headcount is their ability to answer these questions up. For public companies, it might be a shareholder or an investor. For smaller companies, or just if you're in a bootstrap, the CEO. The leader is saying the things that we're doing help achieve business outcomes versus, protect something that I'm trying to do, et cetera. And so what she's arguing in the article that I think you and I have an idea of where you're going to go with this one. But what we argue almost every week is that to be a great executive, you have to know headcount. Chris, what's your reaction?
Absolutely. This is a good layout. I've seen this play out many ways on both sides, where an executive is trying to preserve their own team size, empire building, as you call it. And what ultimately happens is that they wind up leaving the organization because they're not doing what's best for the business. And you look at the leaders that are thinking more broadly about the business. Where can I, think about how do I reallocate headcount dynamically in order to deliver against new initiatives for the business, and how does that actually play out to the board versus how do I keep my team? I won't talk too much about the stories in case anyone that I know listens to anything that we say, but this played out a million times. And one of the things that we look at the kind of director level when you're leading a large team is how are you using your team productively in a way that actually delivers success for the business and actually helps other teams so that they don't need to build their own personal capability to do the thing. I was pretty lucky that I was leading a team that was the enablement function as well as doing recruiting. We were helping all the other teams do their own recruiting and get better. So I had that experience of kind of seeing both sides of it, but seeing certain leaders who were trying to protect their team by not having them contribute outside of their core job ultimately hurt the business and ultimately hurt them because they never grew outside of that role from a manager into a executive type position.
Yeah, I don't watch sports. Disclaimer, I'm about to make a sports analogy, but I don't watch sports anymore. It ended for me in the 90s. I was the best baseball card collector you could imagine at 10, 12, whatever it was. And then they went on strike. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Probably another workforce planning conversation. That said, the difference between, leaders, or the difference between a great, like a team captain or the leader on a team and a great player is like individual stats versus team outcomes. And so, I feel like in business, everyone has their own resume. They have their own progression. They're trying to achieve their own thing. It's a little bit, there's less glory, I would say, in, earning your CEO's best outcome, especially in this day and age, than winning a championship 3 times in a row. Shout out Bulls 90s. But the difference between the leader and the player is the difference between like, how do you care about things? And it's a balance. I get businesses and sports, but you're going to balance whether or not you make the sacrifice for your team size, for your title, for your whatever, and you help the business out. And my business analogies when I was at Uber, we did distributed city teams, right? Every, city had people who were on the drivers and on the riders, and they would market to get demand, and they would do things to get drivers on the platform, yada, yada, yada. And then at a certain point, it made sense to centralize certain things that could be, leverage economies of scale. And that was like a moment where you saw different people like, I want to hold on to the people in my team. No, I'm happy to give it. I embrace regional ops. You're just going to see it. So I think it's very difficult when you're more junior in your career to kind of like identify these things. But the closer to the sun you get, this becomes the difference between, people that founder or that leader wants to have around and not. So totally agree. Jackie Simon, thank you for the content. We're almost at time. We're a little over time. I hope you don't have a meeting at top of the hour, but my name is Eric, Headcount 365 founder, joined by Chris Mannion. We are the Headcount experts. We're looking forward to a jam-packed guest schedule for the rest of the year. Follow Chris on Meander, on LinkedIn. Look at the Recruiting Analytics YouTube channel. If you haven't seen Headcount 365 yet, check out the blog. We're doing a 4-part series on AI and the org chart and getting your data ready for AI. So that will not only be coming out in kind of some written content, we'll do some episodes here, but another fantastic episode of the Headcount Experts. Reaction episodes are always my favorite. Stay tuned for some guests starting next week or maybe the following. TBD.
This is fun.
Goodbye.